Would you welcome our guest, Mercy Jerome Kersey? Here he is, right here.
Kersey! Oh! Whoa!
Here comes Kersey! What a play!
Whatever the Portland Trailblazers needed, he gave it to them.
Kersey! Rebound number 19!
The epitome of versatility throughout his career.
Jerome Kersey everywhere!
Jerome Kersey's value came in everything that didn't show up on the stat sheet. But just to clear up any confusion, he stuffed that stat sheet as well.
There's no question about it. He's a very good small forward.
For a decade in Rip City, he was Clyde Drexler's running mate, both literally and figuratively.
Drexler in the middle. Kersey, the trailer score!
You just know it's coming, and your other team, and you know it's coming, but what can you do?
Hustle and hard work was his specialty.
What I admire about him, he just played so hard.
Power dunks were his trademark.
Oh, how he can finish! Jerome Kersey!
The 90s Blazers don't make two finals appearances without him. His effort and leadership eventually leading him to a ring.
The San Antonio Spurs win their first ever NBA championship.
Jerome Kersey, the ultimate impact player.
The energy and the physicality and the way he played, just guys just fed off that.
Let's jog your memory. Growing up in Clarksville, but attending Bluestone High in Skipwith, Virginia, Jerome Kersey didn't start taking basketball seriously until the 11th grade, but was immediately the team's best player, earning an all-region selection and leading the Barons to the playoffs as a senior. Yet he still wasn't garnering much D1 attention, so when high school was over, Kersey took one of the only opportunities he had to keep playing basketball, signing with then Division II Longwood College. But even then, his spot wasn't guaranteed. Jerome Kersey was just a walk-on. Yet Lancers head coach Ron Bash had a hunch that Kersey might be a diamond in the rough, and it wasn't long before that diamond was shining. Kersey quickly became a star for the Lancers. He was only a freshman, but he was also the franchise. Yet after the season, Longwood and Bash would have a messy parting of ways, and Kersey got pulled into a bit of that conflict when a recently terminated Bash started talking to some much bigger programs about a possible Kersey transfer. But that didn't happen. Kersey remained a Lancer, and he continued leading the team as a sophomore. He was named All-Region, yet even though he was Longwood's star, he knew that didn't make him exempt from the hard work or the dirty work. By his junior season, Kersey was a secret to no one. He was the #1 guy on every game plan, someone who could single-handedly take over, even named a third-team All-American. Going into Kersey's senior year, Longwood had lost a couple starters. Kersey was still a top scorer and rebounder, but he was often becoming a one-man show, trying to do as much as he could each game. It didn't lead to much team success, but Kersey still got his recognition. This year he was named a first-team All-American. The past 4 years hadn't been great for Longwood, but Jerome Kersey had given the best audition he could for the NBA. His name was plastered all over the Longwood record book. Still, he hadn't heard much from pro scouts, but he never planned for the NBA, so if the pros weren't in his future, he was fine going on with his life. At the same time, he had nothing to lose. Jerome Kersey added his name to one of the most stacked draft classes of all time. The same draft which saw Portland select Sam Bowie 2nd overall also saw them select Jerome Kersey 46th overall. Kersey was a virtual unknown to Blazers fans.
No one ever heard of Jerome Kersey before today unless you're a fan of Longwood, Virginia College.
But those are the type of players who can surprise everybody. And while nothing was guaranteed for Kersey, he was confident about his chances to make the team. Portland felt they had found something special, but also knew it might take some time before Kersey had an impact. He also had to adjust. He had played center in college, but his size had him more suited for small forward in the NBA, and he was stuck behind a lot of wing talent. Not only did the Blazers have 2 former All-Stars in forward Kiki Vandeweghe and guard Jim Paxson, but they also had a second-year shooting guard named Clyde Drexler. So Kersey spent his rookie year coming off the bench. He was raw, and his game wasn't all that refined, but he was a hard worker and an energy guy that even some of the best players in the league were taking notice of. His athleticism and hustle was encouraging. He played above the rim, showed great effort on the glass, and was effective on both ends of the floor. His defensive ability much needed on a Blazers team who didn't play a lot of defense. But with a top 5 offense, they were still able to manage 42 wins and get a playoff berth against the Mavs. Kersey rarely saw the floor in a close first-round series, a series which Portland eventually won in 4 games, setting up a second-round matchup with the LA Lakers. Kersey again wasn't seeing the floor too much over the first 3 games, as LA jumped out to a 3-0 lead, but he finally got some minutes in Game 4 and finished with 10 points and 3 steals to help Portland to their first win. Then while they lost the series 2 nights later, Kersey had 18 points off the bench, wrapping up his rookie year with averages of about 6 points, 2.5 rebounds, and half a steal per game. Kersey had wowed fans as a rookie, yet also left them scratching their head. His own teammates had begun calling him Jerome Crazy.
Kersey's a very exciting player, needs to learn to control a lot of the aggressiveness he has, but he's going to be a fine player for the Portland Trailblazers.
So his primary focus during his first NBA offseason was getting himself more under control. But even so, he was still stuck behind Portland's best players, and minutes were going to be hard to come by. So Jerome Kersey's second season looked a lot like his first. His minutes had gone up slightly, and as you'd hope, so did his numbers. He still wasn't much of a shooter, but those years playing down low at Longwood really taught him how to rebound and score close to the hoop, on full display in year 2, as Kersey shot nearly 55% from the field, a lot of those points coming on big finishes in transition, the type of above-the-rim play which would get Kersey a spot in the 1986 slam dunk contest. The Blazers got bad news when Sam Bowie went down in January, but this also meant that Kersey's frontcourt versatility was needed even more, and over the next couple of months, he saw a jump in his minutes. But a few more minutes from Kersey wasn't enough to stop the Blazers from dropping 12 straight in February, a losing streak that would threaten their playoff hopes, but they were able to find their footing in time to finish with 40 wins, which was enough for a return to the playoffs and a matchup with Denver. Kersey's postseason minutes would again be limited. They were higher than last year, but still weren't enough for Kersey to really make an impact. The team split the first 2 before Denver closed it out in 4 games, and Kersey's season ended with averages of about 8.5 points, 3.5 rebounds, and a steal per game. Going into the 87 season, head coach Jack Ramsey had been replaced with Mike Schuler. Kersey seemed optimistic about this change. A new guy who was going to be fair and be tough, something Kersey had no problem with, and he hoped that the new coach may bring a new emphasis on defense. The season started, and that wasn't really the case. Portland allowed the 3rd most points in the league. Luckily, they countered that by scoring more points than any other team. Drexler had become a full-blown star, and while Vandeweghe wasn't the all-around player Drexler was, he could definitely score. So for the 3rd straight year, Kersey was stuck coming off the bench, yet would also receive another minutes increase. Now one of the first guys off the bench. Schuler also recognized Kersey's versatility, and Kersey continued as a source of everything for Portland. He scored, he rebounded, he forced turnovers, and was even dishing some dimes, all while shooting over 50% from the field. Kersey even played himself into the starting lineup a few times. The results were good, yet that permanent starting spot continued to elude him. But the recognition was coming. Then he helped himself get some more with a great performance in the 1987 dunk contest.
All right, here is Jerome Kersey. This is the Trailblazers forward who has replaced Dominique Wilkins with a sore back.
The fans were excited for a Michael Jordan and Dominique Wilkins slam dunk battle, but the fill-in did his best to give the fans another classic battle. It may not have been at the level most were expecting, but Kersey brought out some nice dunks. He made it all the way to the final round. But in the end, Jordan's hang time and creativity were just too much. Kersey finished as runner-up, but he was getting noticed, and even Jordan had to give some respect to his lesser-known draft mate. Back in Portland, things were looking good. The Blazers had already hit the 30-win mark by the break. Even with their fast-paced, high-scoring game plan, they didn't lose steam. By season's end, they had come up 1 win short of 50 on the season. Still, 49 wins was more than enough for a playoff berth, and this year they were taking on the Rockets. For the 3rd straight postseason, Kersey's minutes were limited. He averaged over 25 during the regular season, but saw that number drop to 15 in a 4-game series with Houston. He would play good defense against the bigger Rockets, and have a 14-point Game 4. But that was Portland's final game of the season, as Kersey's 3rd year had ended with him averaging about 12.5 points, 6 rebounds, and 1.5 steals per game. It had been 3 years of improvement for Jerome Kersey. Sure, he didn't come into the league from a big program or have a big name, but numbers don't lie. Finally, in his 4th season, Kersey would get his chance. Kiki Vandeweghe was sidelined early in the year, which gave Kersey an opportunity in the starting lineup. Kersey didn't waste it. He hit double figures in his first 24 games as a starter, which included a career-high 36-point outburst in a win over the Sixers. He had 8 double-doubles in that stretch as well. His most impressive double-double came just days after competing in another slam dunk contest. In a February 12th game versus Denver, Kersey went for 34 points and a career-high 20 rebounds. Jerome Kersey was breaking out, the Blazers' leading rebounder and a top 3 scorer, on a career-high scoring average, really proving himself as a difference maker.
Back when Kenny Carr retired, Sam Bowie broke his leg, then Murphy, Vandeweghe, and Paxson went down with injuries. They plugged in Jerome Kersey to the starting lineup. Everybody said, well, Vandeweghe will be missed. Portland got better.
But it wasn't just Kersey who made the Blazers better. Drexler was now an MVP candidate. The Blazers had another up-and-comer at the point guard position in the third-year Terry Porter, and an early season trade had landed them a rookie big man named Kevin Duckworth. The starting five was different, but it was working, and where the Blazers were at their best was in transition. Seeing Porter, Drexler, and Kersey running the break was a scary sight for any defense. Portland remained one of the league's best offensive teams. They had 2 separate 9-game win streaks. When the dust settled at the end of the year, they were one of the best teams in the West, 53 wins and a first-round matchup with Utah. Finally, Kersey got big playoff minutes, and he was ready. His first career playoff start saw him go for 26 points on over 72% shooting. He added 2 steals and 2 blocks, and Portland took Game 1. Kersey had an efficient 17 in Game 2, but Utah evened it. Then while Kersey averaged about 18 points and 9 rebounds across the next 2 games, he only got about 36% of his shots to drop. The Blazers dropped both games in Utah, and another season came to an end in the first round, with Kersey's career year seeing him average about 19 points, 8.5 rebounds, and 1.5 steals per game. Kersey's emergence had led to some conflict between Vandeweghe and Coach Schuler, mainly due to the fact that Vandeweghe wanted his old spot back, but Schuler clearly favored Kersey. Both players had their strengths, yet Kersey contributed in so many ways, and gave Schuler a lot of freedom with his lineups. Kersey was never one to ruffle feathers off the court, but even he knew a choice had to be made, and Portland chose Kersey, trading Vandeweghe at the deadline. But at the time of the trade, Schuler wasn't even their coach. He had been let go about a week earlier after a disappointing start, and was replaced with assistant Rick Adelman. Regardless of coach, Kersey had turned in another great season. He was one of 4 Blazers to average at least 17 points, and again led the team in rebounding. He had 25 double-doubles, and even recorded his first triple-double, and gave fans his final career dunk contest performance. The Blazers were talented, but they were undisciplined. Turnovers and fouls were an issue. Then when they got fouled, they were one of the worst at converting at the line, and Kersey was no exception, with free throw shooting being one of his weakest points throughout his career. Portland struggled to finish games. They lost a lot of close ones, and only managed 39 wins on the year, but it was still enough for the West's final playoff spot, and a matchup with the defending champion Lakers. Kersey was one of 3 Blazers to average at least 20 points in this series. He led the team in rebounding, and on defense, he averaged over 3 steals per game. But again, these were the defending champion Lakers, and Portland didn't stand much of a chance. A 3-game sweep and another first-round exit for Portland, as Kersey's year had ended with him averaging about 17.5 points, 8.5 rebounds, and 2 steals per game. So the 80s hadn't been great to the Blazers, but over the past few years, they had found some great players. Jerome Kersey was one of them, and with a new decade set to begin the following season, Portland quickly showed that the 90s would bring a better version of the Blazers. A full season under Adelman saw the same high-octane Blazers offense, but that playstyle started on defense. Portland pressed and Portland gambled. Sure, they gave up plenty of points, but when they started disrupting their opponents and forcing turnovers, they could play how they wanted to, and games turned into track meets. Their fast break continued as their biggest weapon. Kersey's ability to jump passing lanes or take a rebound coast to coast was a big reason for their transition effectiveness. And even in the half court, Kersey was a lot to deal with. Too strong for smaller defenders and too fast for bigger guys. His 8.4 rebounds a night were a career high. Yet this year he wasn't Portland's top rebounder, that distinction belonging to top offseason acquisition Buck Wiliams. their new defensive anchor that had only cost them a first rounder and the often injured Sam Bowie, a much better deal than what was reportedly on the table at the trade deadline last season. And that wasn't their only good acquisition, as the Blazers also had a new sixth man in rookie forward Cliff Robinson. The team addressed two of their biggest needs in defense and depth, and it led to results. Portland won 12 of their first 15 to start the year. They were winning the close ones. The new guys were fitting in seamlessly. The season continued, and Portland improved. A 10-game win streak in March had them challenging the Lakers for the best record in the league. Ultimately, they finished with 59 wins. Not quite first place, but still the second best record in the NBA, and a 2 seed in the playoffs. Portland got Dallas in round 1, the Blazers trying to avoid a 5th straight first-round exit. Kersey was doing his usual over the first 2 games, giving the Blazers a little bit of everything. Then with a chance to sweep the Mavs, Kersey put up a game-high 29 points and added 9 boards. It was Portland's biggest win of the series. Some players had taken a beating, but they were finally out of the first round. Round 2 brought another Texas team, but one that was much more dangerous, led by Rookie of the Year David Robinson. Yet Kersey didn't seem too intimidated after going for 25 and 16 in a Game 1 win. His shot wasn't falling all that often in this series, but he still got his points and got himself to the free throw line. As far as overall contributions go, Kersey was probably Portland's best player. He averaged over 21 points and 9 rebounds, and was good for a couple steals and a couple blocks each night. But this was a back and forth series all the way, coming down to a Game 7. Kersey had 21 and 15 in the series decider, but that's not what decided the series.
Time on the shot clock. And Strickland throws the ball behind his back, and Drexler in a foot race. Foul.
A wild pass from Rod Strickland in overtime led to Drexler icing the series. But let's give Kersey his credit. Instead of letting the pass go out of bounds, he saved it and threw a great lead pass to Drexler to ensure the Blazers win. And now all that was standing in their way of a finals appearance was the Phoenix Suns. Kersey could do little wrong in the conference finals. With Drexler struggling from the field, Kersey stepped up as Portland's top scorer in the series. He was also their best rebounder. He had double-doubles in each of the first 2 games, and Portland won both. Then in Phoenix, the Suns took care of business, surviving a 29-point Game 4 from Kersey to tie the series. But back at home, Kersey recorded his 3rd double-double to give Portland a lead. Then another Kersey double-double on the road helped the Blazers lock up the West. Their final opponent was the defending champion Detroit Pistons. A very physical series would have Kersey in foul trouble often. After 2, the teams were tied, and over the next 2 games, Kersey averaged 30 points. Yet both games ended in Blazers losses. Then after one of his quietest games of the postseason, Portland's year was over, 3 wins away from an NBA title, with Kersey's season ending with him averaging about 16 points, 8.5 rebounds, and 1.5 steals per game. Portland was busy keeping their core together during the offseason. Kersey would have to wait until the regular season for his money, eventually signing a 4-year extension about a week into the 91 season. The Blazers needed their do-it-all forward. Portland had also added a much-needed shooter in Danny Ainge, as they rolled out one of the deepest rosters in franchise history, boasting 7 players who averaged at least 11 points this year. Kersey would see his scoring drop for the 4th straight season, but with so many mouths to feed, Kersey's offense wasn't as needed, and he wasn't a guy to complain if he wasn't scoring. Besides, if he wanted points, he could just fly in for an offensive rebound and an easy putback. Portland remained one of the highest scoring teams in the NBA. They came out on fire with 11 straight wins. Even their defense looked better, as they forced turnovers and protected the rim, and things like that led to their bread and butter. The transition game continued as Portland's calling card. Kersey was a big part of that. Whether he was a decoy or the one finishing, he was instrumental in their fast break success and their overall success. Portland lost 3 of their first 30 games. Then Kersey went down for 6 games. And in that short stretch, Portland doubled their loss total. Kersey's impact on the Blazers went well beyond the stat sheet. And when he returned, Portland got back on track. They won 16 straight to end the season. Last year's 59 wins were impressive. This year they upped it to 63, the most in the NBA. Going to their first round matchup with Seattle, Portland looked too hot to stop. Kersey had a monster Game 1, 31 points to help give the Blazers a 1-0 lead. He was quieter in Game 2, but Portland won anyway. Needing one more win in Seattle, home court advantage wasn't as valuable in a series between two closely situated teams. But it was enough for Seattle to win both at home. Game 5 was Kersey's worst, but the rest of the Blazers took care of business and survived the first round scare. Round 2 brought the Utah Jazz. Portland took a 2-0 lead at home. Game 1 was a blowout. Portland almost fumbled Game 2, but 34 points from Kersey was a big reason why the Blazers held on. However, this was the high point of the series for Kersey. His shooting touch faded over the remaining games, yet he was still a solid rebounder and defender. The Jazz extended the series to 5, but Portland came out victorious. They were back in the conference finals, taking on the Lakers. It wasn't going to be an easy series, but Kersey had the potential to be a difference maker. He could tire out Magic Johnson with his high energy play on the glass. And on defense, he was versatile, a great rotation and help defender. But it was an unfamiliar start for Portland, dropping Game 1 at home. After 4 games, the Blazers were 1 loss away from elimination. Kersey was Portland's second best scorer in the series, and his 24 offensive rebounds were the most among any player. He went for 20 points and 9 boards in Game 5 to help keep the Blazers alive, but foul trouble limited him to 10 points in Game 6. The Lakers closed out the Blazers. There would be no return to the finals, as Kersey's year ended with him averaging about 15 points, 6.5 rebounds, and 1.5 steals per game. The contracts had been figured out. Nearly every member of Portland's core rotation were in their theoretical prime. It was now or never, but still, as long as Magic and the Lakers were in the West, it would be tough for Portland. Then came the announcement: Magic Johnson retired. So for Portland, anything less than a finals appearance would be a failure. The '92 Blazers were probably the best defensive version of the team since Kersey's arrival, and Kersey had some different expectations on the court. Terry Porter was now the clear-cut option number 2. While Kersey was the team's third leading scorer, his average dropped again. Not a lot of plays were drawn up for him. However, his rebounding went back up to over 8 per game, over 3 of those coming on the offensive glass each night. And on the other end, it wasn't uncommon to see Kersey pull down a rebound and start the break himself. He could hit Drexler for a dunk or Porter for a jumper. His 3.2 assists were a career high, and of course, he was still finishing. But that was the beauty of Jerome Kersey. His game wasn't defined by scoring, and if his shot wasn't falling, he kept playing hard and always made up for it in other areas. Portland as a whole came out flat to begin the year. Kersey dealt with a lingering ankle injury for a lot of the season. It was part of the reason why he put so much focus back into rebounding. Luckily, the Blazers would rebound too. They recovered enough after their slow start to head into the All-Star break sitting at 32-14. Soon after the break, they put together their biggest win streak of the season. It wasn't the same dominance as last year, but they still totaled 57 wins, and were playing well as they entered a first-round matchup with the Magicless Lakers. Kersey was banged up and a little rusty to begin the playoffs.
Has a left shoulder contusion plus a sore right ankle, missed the final 3 games of the regular season.
But like usual, if Kersey was hurting, he didn't show it. He dropped at least 13 points in each of the first 3 games, averaged over 5 rebounds and 3 assists for the series, and forced nearly 2 turnovers a night. The Lakers were able to steal 1 win, but the series was never really close. A gentleman's sweep pushed Portland through to round 2. The second round brought a familiar opponent in the Phoenix Suns. Kersey had a slow start, but he came to life in Game 2 with 25 points in a win. He put up 21 and 10 in a double OT thriller to help the Blazers win Game 4. Then with a chance to close out the series at home, Kersey had a signature game: 16 points, 12 rebounds, 8 assists, and 5 steals. Portland took the game and the series. It was on to the conference finals to take on Utah. By this point, Kersey was feeling good. With a trip to the finals on the line, he would have one of the best series of his career. He was Portland's third leading scorer at nearly 20 points a game and shot over 55%. He was their second best rebounder and third best distributor. And on defense, he was one of 2 Blazers to average at least a steal and a block. He dropped 20 to kick off the series. Portland went up 2-0 at home. Then they went to Utah and dropped both. The series was tied going into a crucial Game 5. Kersey decided he wasn't leaving Portland without a lead.
Buck Wiliams rejected it, and it's Kersey at the other end.
Kersey was attacking the rim from the opening tip.
And that is the tenacity of Jerome Kersey.
Finishing through contact and bringing the fans to their feet.
Kersey again! Oh, how he can finish!
Scoring a team-high 29 points. He pulled down 10 rebounds. Half of those came on the offensive glass. And on the other end, he sent away 4 shots.
Taken away by Rudd to Jeff Malone. Here comes Kersey! What a play! And Malone gets the goal anyway.
Kersey just wanted it more. The Blazers needed overtime, but they got the win. 2 nights later in Utah, they closed it out. After a 1-year hiatus, Portland was back in the finals. Taking on the defending champion Chicago Bulls would be a tough test, especially since they had great players at the 2 through the 4. Game 1 wasn't even a competition. The next 2 games saw Kersey struggle with foul trouble. Yet Portland was only down 2-1. They tied it in Game 4. Kersey stayed out of foul trouble and gave the Blazers 21 points. He followed that up with a Game 5 double-double, but it was an easy Bulls win. Then with their season on the line, Kersey came out firing in Game 6, scoring 12 first-quarter points and ultimately finishing with 24. But fouls and turnovers were the Blazers' undoing. Chicago won by 4 points, and Portland had come up just short once again, as Kersey wrapped up his year with averages of about 12.5 points, 8 rebounds, and 1.5 steals per game. There was no reason to believe that Portland still couldn't compete for a championship, but the '93 season started and the doubts began creeping in. Kersey had surgery over the offseason to address his ankle issues. The Blazers had also made a big splash with the signing of point guard Rod Strickland. Initially a backup, Strickland would end up spending a lot of time in the starting lineup, and that was because of one thing.
You look back over the last 3 seasons, when you talk about the Portland Trailblazers, the one thing that you have to talk about is the fact they've been able to remain injury-free. They have missed more games between Drexler and Kersey this season than they have over the last 3 years.
Injuries were finally catching up to Portland, and they hit Kersey hard. Drexler missed the most time, but Kersey missed 17 games. He came off the bench for 15 of his 65 games he played. His minutes were the lowest they had been since he became a starter. Jerome Kersey was 30 years old. He had knee tendonitis and was slowing down. He went all out every time he was on the court, but his body couldn't take the same beating it once did. Obviously, Portland was affected by their top players missing significant time, and they were happy whenever Kersey was on the floor. But all things considered, they did pretty well, turning in their 4th consecutive 50-win season and getting a playoff matchup with San Antonio. Drexler was sidelined to begin the series. Kersey had been back in the starting lineup for about a month, and as a starter in Game 1, he was one of the only Blazers that showed up. Portland shot about 38% as a team. Kersey shot nearly 70%. He had a game-high 24 points and added 9 rebounds. Portland lost by 1. Drexler returned for Game 2, so Kersey went to the bench for the rest of the series, yet remained very productive. Portland evened it, but close losses in each of their next 2 marked an earlier than usual end to their season. Kersey's year wrapping up with averages of about 10.5 points, 6 rebounds, and a steal per game. The Blazers were aging, and major roster changes had already begun over the offseason. Kevin Duckworth was shipped out, replaced by the more agile Harvey Grant, and Kersey couldn't help but worry, wondering if he'd be the next casualty. Terry Porter would eventually become a backup to Strickland, and after a rough start to the year for Kersey, he lost his starting spot to Grant after 3 games. But now Kersey wasn't even the first player off the bench. The aging fan favorite saw his minutes drop once again. Kersey wasn't happy. He could live with being a bench player, but he expected more than 16 minutes a night. He could still give you toughness, effort, and hustle on both ends, but chronic injuries had taken away some of his explosiveness. He couldn't blow by guys like he used to, and with an outside shot that had never really developed, Kersey's offensive effectiveness suffered in a league that was shooting more than ever. Adelman didn't seem interested in using him, and in early March, Kersey dropped a bomb, but it was past the deadline, so Kersey would at least be finishing out the season in Portland. The Blazers were still a playoff team, but this year they would drop below the 50-win mark, only managing the 7 seed and a first-round matchup with Houston. For the first time in a long time, Kersey didn't have a huge impact. He had always been a guy who upped his play in the postseason, but this year he appeared in 3 of 4 games. playing very limited minutes and struggling when he was on the court. Portland's season again ended in the first round, and Kersey finished his year with averages of about 6.5 points, 4 rebounds, and a steal per game. It had been the most frustrating season of Kersey's career, but there was no trade, and Kersey was still a Blazer to begin his 11th season, even after Coach Adelman had shown little interest in playing him, except he was now former Coach Adelman, fired soon after their early playoff exit, and replaced with PJ Carlesimo. Kersey was willing to give it another go. However, if he didn't fit into Carlesimo's plans, he would still expect to be traded. Kersey remained a bench player under Carlesimo, and the game continued to evolve while Kersey continued to slow down. He never abandoned his high-effort play, but offensively he just wasn't the physically overpowering force he once was. Injuries really limited Kersey over the first half of the year. It was obvious that at the very least, his time in Portland was coming to an end. But before he was gone, the franchise player was shipped out. With the championship window clearly closed, Portland traded Drexler to the Rockets. After the trade, a healthier Kersey would get some real play, logging over 21 minutes a night in his final 40 games, and even averaging double-figure scoring in April. Portland continued their slow decline with just 44 wins, yet this was still enough for a first-round matchup with Phoenix. Kersey was a great player off the bench in this series. He hit double figures in every game and shot over 57%. He even went for 17 points in Game 3 before fouling out. Portland would lose this game and the two before it. Their season over after a first-round sweep, with Kersey's year seeing him average about 8 points, 4 rebounds, and a steal per game. It was time for Portland and Kersey to part ways. North of the border, there were 2 new teams set to join the NBA, and in the upcoming expansion draft, Kersey was left unprotected. Jerome Kersey was selected by the Toronto Raptors. They didn't really want him, but Portland had agreed to eat his whole salary if Toronto picked him, so the 33-year-old was a Raptor, only briefly. His salary still counted towards the Raptors' cap. Toronto didn't want that. An expansion team was permitted to cut one player without any cap hit, so a couple months later, they came to terms on a release. A couple weeks after that, Kersey signed with Golden State. On paper, the Warriors looked stacked. They had mainstays like Chris Mullin and Tim Hardaway, budding star Latrell Sprewell, and first overall pick Joe Smith. Oh, and they were coached by one Rick Adelman, so you wouldn't expect Kersey to be a starter. But with Mullin and Ronnie Cycli missing extended periods of time, Adelman went to the guy he trusted. Kersey started 58 of his 76 appearances. Offensive efficiency remained an issue, but Kersey brought his usual all-around play and his fearless attitude, even getting into a somewhat notorious fight with Sprewell at practice. The two started fighting with their fists, and Kersey was winning. They were eventually separated, but reportedly, Sprewell returned with a 2x4. In later years, Kersey confirmed that there was a fight, but also said that there was never a weapon. Regardless of how it turned out, Sprewell found out that Kersey was a man who demanded respect. The Warriors weren't the offensive power some thought they might be. The season was going poorly enough that Hardaway was shipped to the Heat. When it was all said and done, Golden State managed just 36 wins. Kersey missed the playoffs for the first time in his career and finished the season with averages of about 6.5 points, 5 rebounds, and a steal per game. The Warriors moved on from Kersey after the season, but he was scooped up pretty quickly by a Lakers team who had just added Shaquille O'Neal. Kersey was originally brought in as a depth guy, but would end up starting the majority of his 70 games. And even while playing through significant injury, his minutes were the highest they had been in years. He was a great rebounder and averaged close to 2 steals a game. Most importantly, he was a veteran leader who knew what it took to win. Shaq helped a lot when it came to winning. LA finished the season at 56-26. Out of all teams, they began the playoffs against Portland. Kersey came off the bench in this series, but was a rebounding machine, averaging nearly 8 per game as the Lakers won in 4. The second round brought Utah. Kersey often struggled with fouls and played lower minutes because of it. He wasn't as much of a rebounding threat against a bigger Jazz team. This time the Lakers were on the losing end of the series, and Kersey's year in LA had seen him average about 7 points, 5 rebounds, and 1.5 steals per game. The Lakers wanted Kersey back, but he would instead sign with Seattle, joining their new duo of Gary Payton and Vin Baker. but it wouldn't be the season Kersey hoped for. Injuries again caught up to him, and his 37 games played were the lowest of his career. His numbers remained similar, he was just rarely on the court. Yet Seattle looked strong, 61 wins, and a first-round matchup with Minnesota. Kersey would be an efficient scorer, even hitting double figures twice. Surprisingly, the series went the distance, but Seattle pulled it out in Game 5. Next up was the Lakers. Kersey had 12 points in a Game 1 win. Then he and Seattle went cold, losing the next 3. Then even though Kersey had 13 in Game 5, the Lakers ended the series. And Kersey ended his season with averages of about 6.5 points, 3.5 rebounds, and 1.5 steals per game. It was another year and another team. Kersey signed on with the Spurs for the lockout-shortened 99 season. He played nearly every game, but he was 36 years old. His value wasn't so much what he offered on the court. Instead, it was as a veteran leader and locker room presence that every championship contender needs. And the Spurs were a contender, finishing tied for the league's best record. Kersey didn't get a lot of action in the playoffs, but he had an impact, most notably in Game 4 of the conference semis versus the Lakers, when he scored 9 fourth-quarter points to help close out the series. San Antonio made it all the way to the finals, and for Kersey, the third time was the charm. After 15 years in the league, he was finally a champion, ending his season with averages of about 3 points, 3 rebounds, and a steal per game. Kersey remained with the Spurs as they went for a repeat. Even into his late 30s, he still gave them good minutes, and would even start 18 games. San Antonio went 53-29, but as they entered their first-round matchup with Phoenix, they were without Tim Duncan, and the Suns knocked off the defending champs in 4. Kersey ended his year with averages of about 4.5 points, 3 rebounds, and a steal per game. Kersey would sign with Milwaukee early in the 01 season, but was only able to manage 22 games, partially due to his own injuries and partially to coaching decision. The Bucks made it to the conference finals, but Kersey had been left off of the playoff roster, his season ending with averages of about 3.5 points, 2 rebounds, and half a steal per game. After 17 years, Jerome Kersey called it a career. Not too bad for a Division II player. He left the game as one of the greatest players in Blazers history, and possibly an even better community member. From the day he arrived in Portland, Kersey made it a point to be as active as possible in the community. Whether it was autograph signings, camps, or fundraisers, Jerome Kersey would probably be there. Then shortly after his playing career, he was back in the NBA. He worked as an ambassador for the Blazers. He even joined Terry Porter's coaching staff in Milwaukee. By the mid-2010s, he was back working with the Blazers. But on February 18, 2015, tragedy struck, and Jerome Kersey passed away unexpectedly. His death later found to be a result of a blood clot in his leg, one that was believed to have formed due to a knee surgery he had undergone just days earlier. It was a sad day for the Kersey family and Blazers faithful. Jerome Kersey had been a role model for decades, a fan favorite player and beloved community member.
Too soon. All the good ones go too soon.
Jerome Kersey spent a decade with the Portland Trailblazers. He didn't really have any prolific seasons, but there were few that could do as much as he could. He put full effort into guarding whoever he was asked. He hustled for rebounds. He fought for loose balls. His offensive game was never all that polished, but his athleticism made up for that. Jerome Kersey was the kind of guy who could make things happen. And alongside Clyde Drexler, he gave Portland one of the most dangerous fast break combos of all time. It's a shame that he couldn't have been a part of a Portland Trailblazers championship, but he still got his ring. There were no All-Stars or individual accolades, but that ring is a representation of what Jerome Kersey was all about, winning basketball. But that's it for today's episode on Jerome Kersey. Hope you enjoyed it, and make sure to subscribe for more videos like this one. If you liked it, check out this one on one of his 84 draft mates, or this one on one of his Blazers teammates. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.